Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us to Ensuring Success 2023. We are live here from AMS Pictures in Dallas, Texas, where we're going to be spending the rest of today and all day tomorrow sharing incredible and continuing education opportunities with you. I'm Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor, and I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsors that make Ensuring Success possible, and they are ADP, Avalara, BotKeeper, Canopy, CPA.com, eFile4Biz, Relay, WriteWorks, SafeSend, SureLink, Wolters Kluwer, Xero, and Zoho, and in particular, Instead by Corby, which is the sponsor of this session right here. We also would like to explain to you just briefly how CPE works for this and all of our sessions. We provide 3 continuing education credit codes, and in this case, this particular session also qualifies for CE credit. So we provide 3 codes during the session. At the bottom of the screen, there'll be a banner that shows the code, and when we announce that it's time for you to record that code, you'll hear this sound. That's to remind you that you need to write down that code, so it'll be 3 times during the session. You'll need to write down the code, and then at the end, you'll be able to go to the CPE area on our website and download CPE certificates. We have had some technical difficulties with the certificates this morning, and I understand they're still working on them. So we'll let you know as soon as they're ready, but it's not a rush because the certificates will be available once we work out the bugs in the system. They'll be available like for the next year. So you can get your certificate at any time. And at this point, I'd like to quickly introduce the members of this panel, and they include James Rainwater, Andrew Argue, Lucia Valenzuela, and my co-moderator, Alexandra DeFelice, and I'll have each of you introduce yourselves briefly.
I'm James Rainwater. I'm owner of Rainwater CPA, a tax firm, and also work with Corby and Instead to do some coaching for them.
My name is Andrew Argue. I am the CEO of Instead, a tax management platform for businesses and their accountants.
My name is Lucia Valenzuela. I'm the Managing Director of Tax Services for Instead. So I help out on the partnership side, get firms integrated with the software and help them become successful in both using the software and in expanding their tax services.
And I'm Alexandra DeFelice, Director of Marketing and Business Development for Payne & Fears Law Firm in Southern California. I'm co-moderating with Gail, and I am taking questions from the audience for this session and all 14 sessions. And I'm also the designated bell ringer for CPE. I do want to say that this particular session, we wanted to kick it off with a question. So we did just launch a question for the audience, and we will address it in a little bit.
Okay, and speaking of questions, if you have any questions during this session for our speakers, or if you're having any technical difficulties or just want to give us a shout out, you can enter that in the Ask a Question area on your screen, which appears right below the video box that you're looking at right now. So I think our question about what you're worried about this tax season should launch into a kind of a conversation of what do we think people are most concerned about this tax season.
I'll go ahead and kick us off. So we haven't had a normal tax season, I think, since COVID hit. So it seems to get crazier and crazier every year. You have the Inflation Reduction Act going into effect. You have probably, the elections will impact the taxes in some way or another. We're still thinking about 174, and is that going to go away or not? So I think there's a bundle of things that providers are up against. And in every state, it seems like as well, there's more credits, there's more things to consider. And overall, I think folks are still in that place where if they made a lot of money during COVID, or if they're making a lot of money, they feel like they shouldn't be paying because they're keeping the economy going. And if they're not making a lot of money, they don't want to be paying tax. So either way, I think providers are always kind of hearing that stress from their clients. We don't want to pay in taxes, or we don't want to overpay in taxes. And I think that's the number one concern, really.
Yeah, and I think it makes it really hard and difficult from a planning perspective with so many changes that we want to do planning. Our clients want to pay as little as tax as possible for this year, but we don't know how that's going to impact them, over the next couple of years as things change next year with an election year. And then we've got some of these sunset provisions we're going to talk about, and then just general changes, over the next several years. to the tax code. It makes it really difficult to plan.
And one thing I'm looking forward to, I think, this tax season is just how all of these different changes, when you're looking at serving clients, answering client questions, getting the work done, how AI can be more inserted into that process. There's so many interesting tools. We're going to talk about some of them today that we've just seen firms do some incredible things that just really weren't possible before. And so while there's so many things that make tax season harder every year, even things beyond changes in the tax law, staffing shortages, and so on, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch firms adopt some of this new technology and add a little bit of take off some of the burden this season.
Absolutely.
So we got results, Alexandra?
You didn't ring the bell. I want to ring the bell.
No, that's only for get away. That's only for CPE, not for results of polls. We have to come back to that, Gail.
Got it.
Okay. All right, we'll get those results to you soon. So, James, you mentioned, I think it was you who mentioned the sunset provisions coming up with TCJA. Do you want to go into that in a little more detail?
Sure. One of the big ones that's coming up is the sunset of the bonus depreciation, where that's kind of phasing out a little bit every year right now. 2023, we see where bonus depreciation has gone from 100% down to 80%, and that's going to continue to reduce 20% year over year until we get into 2027. That makes a big change for a lot of our clients that are maybe equipment or capital intensive and have been using that depreciation to be able to plan and reduce their taxes. With that having less and less of an impact every year, their taxes are going up every year. So we need to find other ways to help plan for them and help them. We still have Section 179. Section 179 is limitations. You can't have net losses with 179. So a lot of clients have used that bonus depreciation pretty extensively over the past couple of years. And just an interesting note we've seen with a lot of clients that they think that 20% that they can't use on the bonus depreciation means it just disappears and goes away. And we kind of have to re-educate some of our clients that doesn't actually go away. You can still depreciate that, but you can only take 80% of that asset value in 2023, and again 60% in 2024. So that changes pretty significantly.
I was going to ask you one question on that. If you were to look at your clients, how many of them do you think, let's say with the bonus depreciation going away in phases, how many of them are going to be affected? Because they do have 179 still. Like, is it really hitting them yet, or is it still going to take another couple of years, do you think?
Yeah, I think for most of our clients, they still have 179. So most of the businesses we work with, it's kind of, well, do we want to take bonus depreciation or do we want to take 179? They're not super large clients. We're not bumping up against those 179 limitations. So we have a lot of flexibility there. But we do have quite a few real estate clients that want those losses. So they lose the bonus depreciation. They can't necessarily use the 179. So for those clients, that subsect of clients, it makes it more difficult to plan for them.
All right. We want to also talk about changes that have come out of the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's your area, Lucia.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. I think the last session I noticed touched a little bit upon this, but I've worked my entire career in the tax credits and incentives field, and it really is a great year for those types of incentives. The Inflation Reduction Act comes out with a lot of green energy incentives. You can see here, the government pushing their agenda of green energy, and you see all of those ESG type of initiatives that have been slow to come to market, now come to market next year. You also see that for some of the folks at home that have clients that are in the nonprofit space, typically the nonprofit companies aren't really able to take advantage of a lot of these credits and incentives, but you do see some credits in that Inflation Reduction Act for nonprofits. So it'll be a little bit different, I think, for the folks that are servicing those clients to start working in that area. And I do think that as you see more credits, you will see more folks turning to technology and turning to other platforms to kind of get some help, because as the last session alluded, some of these credits are really deep from a knowledge perspective, and they take a lot of time to learn. And so by the time you learn them and then offer the servicing, figure out how to price them, it becomes really difficult to sort of make any profit and serve the clients that are in your base. And so looking for platforms and looking for solutions that are probably going to come out this next year and continue to evolve, I think is going to be important. Also, just leaning on the experts that you guys have already, or the folks that you're working with either externally or internally, to sort of learn those. So if you currently have a specialty tax credit practice, really expanding the service offerings. If you don't, maybe starting to think about, can we move into more of a tax advisory service line, because that's really what clients want, and can we start actually providing these services for those credits before the clients aren't able to take them.
All right, we want to pause just for a moment to tell you that the first CPE code for this session is appearing on the bottom of your screen. So be sure to write down that code, and there will be 2 more. So those will be the codes that verify your attendance in this session. So you'll use those when you're claiming your CPE credit. Okay, I think next we want to go to Section 174. Lucia.
This is a really fun one, and one that I have questions on almost every day. So, the 174 ability to actually expense in the year that those R&E expenses are incurred has been around since the 1950s. So this is a really new thing that I believe snuck up on everybody because every provider that you talk to, oh, this is going to go away, this isn't going to stick around. So last year was the first year that we actually saw this, and what you saw was a lot of companies, especially software companies, pharma companies that are heavily invested in R&D and R&E, get hit pretty hard from a tax liability perspective because of 174. So no longer can you take those deductions in the current year. You now have to amortize over 5 or 15 years for domestic, 5 for domestic, 15 for international. What that basically creates is a position where if you're spending heavily in R&E, you have more tax liability. Now you're still able to offset with some credits, but we saw providers do a couple different things. And I think it's really difficult being in this position as a consultant sometimes or as a CPA where the clients are looking to you to save tax, but it's not your fault that sometimes the law doesn't work in their favor. And so we saw things get a little wonky this year where clients would basically say, I have always been doing R&D or R&E, but this year I'm going to say I'm not because I don't want to pay this additional tax liability. And that put the provider in a really weird place because they have to do the right thing. And so they're basically advising their clients, well, that's not the right way to do things. The other thing that we saw was that clients were sort of in this place where they had to recategorize a lot of expenses or figure out how to minimize their R&E expenses. And so you did see a lot more work. Now, from a provider perspective, a lot of folks weren't prepared to do that work. And so 1, maybe they didn't capitalize on that and charge for it. But 2, they didn't have any tools. And so we will actually be providing a tool in our toolkit after this session that does give you a 174 calculator. So if you're unfamiliar with how to calculate the amortization, you can actually do that with our calculator. But we also feel like R&D is actually a really good place to start for 174 because by basically taking your R&D expenses, you have a starting point for the bigger pool that is 174. But really understanding that this next year, you're still in a place where there's a lot of uncertainty. We have 3 bills going through Congress, Gail, and I think the next time you're going to see something that could happen is about February. And basically, if this rule does not go away, I think providers are in a place where you still have to give folks the math of, you have to tell your clients and educate your clients, but give them the math of, here's what your tax liability is going to look like if 174 doesn't go away. Here's what it's going to look like if it goes away. And it's a very different analysis. And so getting to your clients early in the year, doing that analysis, but knowing that this provision might actually still go away, and from what I hear, go away retroactively, which now puts you in a place where you're amending your prior year returns. It's going to cause a lot of chaos, and I think it's caused more chaos than good. So I don't think that there's anybody on either side of the table that doesn't agree with getting rid of this 174.
Well, and I had a couple questions for you on it, because last year was the first year, right? 2022 tax year. And like you said, some people said, well, I'm not really going to count that. And no one knows for sure, but in your experience, how would you say that's about half of people, 20% of people that maybe are in a situation where when tax season comes around this year, they have to decide, gee, do I want to really do this the right way because I didn't do it the right way last year? Like, how many people is that for most of the firms out there?
I think most people wanted to do things the right way, but there was also not very much guidance. And so depending on what industry you were, I think you did have a little bit more leeway to go either way or not. I don't know off the top of my head the percentage of folks that did take 174, didn't, or claimed and didn't claim. But I do think that it will raise some red flags if historically you've always claimed or had a lot of R&E expenses, and then all of a sudden you stop having R&E expenses. I do think that that's going to raise some red flags. But I also think that this is sort of a ridiculous, and I will say it, I think everybody's written letters to Congress at this point, but like, this is a very ridiculous law because it is sort of de-incentivizes folks to keep their R&D in the U.S., right? So all these pharma companies, all these software companies, we're basically encouraging them to take their R&E and R&D somewhere else, and I think that goes against what the congressional intent of this whole entire R&D and R&E provision was in the first place. So I do, to answer your question, Andrew, I do think that folks are still in a place where they're hesitant to say or admit that they're doing R&E, but I also think that it's, as providers, it's our duty to make sure that folks understand their liability, their risk, and that they are kind of looking at the picture in whole and making sure that they're doing the analysis for both.
And one last question on it is, what do you think, let's say a business did it wrong last year, right? So they went ahead and just expensed everything. They didn't amortize over 5 or 15 years. Then they come in this year and they kind of realize, maybe I want to do this right. What do you think the firm should do, or what should they be considering? And should they go back and amend the 2022 tax return? Should they just kind of act like we're doing it starting in 2023? Like, what do you think most people should consider when making that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a JD by background, so I always err on doing things the right way. And so I do think that folks should talk to their providers and have a very honest conversation about what happened last year. And a lot of the situations that I saw as well was the providers, again, thinking that this was going to go away, didn't invest the time to actually learn. And so at the very last minute, we're sort of putting things together and piecing things together. But I think what will happen is, if you're in that position and you feel like maybe you did things the wrong way, have an honest conversation with your provider. And I think most of us out there who provide these types of services want to do things the right way. And so, it's just about amending and fixing. But if these rules go away, I think that most folks will have a lot of extra work on their plate, and there will be a lot of amendments that'll be happening.
And speaking of a lot of extra work, because this was an open-ended question, it still acted like a multiple-choice question. Pretty much everyone said their biggest concerns were time, longer hours, and keeping up with the tax law changes.
Makes sense.
I understand that.
So do we want to switch over to AI?
Yeah, so I think, I have been just amazed at so many of the things that we've seen firms do, in the last year. Some of our tools, like you can see Gail and Alexandra wearing the Augusta hats. If you were to go to Instead, we do have a couple of different products that have integrated AI into the tax process, one of which is Augusta Rule. But when you look at tax preparation in tax season, I think there's a lot of very interesting things that are going to be happening, and I've seen firms experimenting with AI in the entire process. Some of it's using tools like Carbon, Canopy, some of it's using things more for tax documentation like ours, or it's just using tools that are out there like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and so forth. I was at a event for digital CPA just a few days ago, and I was meeting with a woman there who said that she had a friend who's very ill, and he'd been sick for many, many years. And he started plugging in all of his medical history into the ChatGPT, and he went to the doctor and he tried to diagnose himself. And the doctor said, "No, you don't have this." And he's like, "I'm pretty sure I have this." And the doctor's like, "No, you don't have this." They ran the test, and this individual was able to diagnose himself, and the doctor was sort of surprised, like, "Wow, this is actually what you have." And I loved that story because I think we've already seen that happen with tax clients where, if your staff is giving advice to clients and they're not really using these tools to really try to get the right answer, maybe you've got a client on the other side of the computer there who's going in and saying, "Is my accountant really saying the right thing here? Like, are they really giving me the right advice?" And so I think the firms that are really doing a good job adopting these tools are getting better answers quicker. They're getting better results out to clients, and if they're not doing it, I think, especially at the staff level, you're going to run the risk of having clients on the other side that maybe find little errors where people are working quick, things are going fast. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to provide better value to clients, get more accuracy out, and it's going to be really fun to watch all the firms adopt all these different tools this year in particular.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think this is one of the most exciting times, having spent my entire career in the accounting industry, for us. This is the first real shakeup, I'll say, that we've had since I've been in the profession, with AI coming in hot. I think that there's a lot of folks that are, in the Gen Z generation and the millennial generation that are adopting these technologies a lot faster than the policies and maybe even the security can keep up with. And so I think it's really important for firm owners, especially smaller firm owners, to address these issues now, create a policy around what they want for AI, and so that their staff and their managers don't go rogue on them. And if you don't have a policy, you really can't, dictate who's using what information and where your client information is going. And I do think, like Google, right? We all Google check everything. I do think that younger folks are getting into a habit of going to ChatGPT first for drafting their emails, looking at, specific tax rules, and you can find that, or I think that what'll actually happen is that instead of the in-office experience where the staff or the manager, learned from osmosis, watching his or her partner talk to clients and getting pulled into meetings. So that's not really where we are anymore because we are in a remote environment. I think instead what'll happen is I think these tools will actually become educational for the younger folks as well. They're going to go there, they're going to learn the basics, and then they're going to be more efficient and effective with their time. And I think the learning curve you'll see, and I saw a study came out a couple days ago, the learning curve and the path to partnership I think is going to be a lot shorter now than it was in the past, because it would take you so long. And maybe you can talk to this. I mean, I know you've been in the practice a lot longer than I have, but I mean, you've seen a lot of folks come through. I mean, the path to partnership used to take you 10, 15 years. Now with these tools, I wouldn't be surprised if it's half that.
Not anymore. It's collapsed it so much. The ability to get that learning and education, like you said, so much faster rather than having to just sit around a partner for a decade or 2 decades. It happens so much faster now. And I used to be at a large CPA firm, but I was a sole proprietor for a long time and slowly kind of built up with our team. And the AI just gives us so much leverage in that type of firm environment where we have a lot of the resources now that I would have had at a big firm. But now in a smaller firm, I can be competitive with bigger firms because we have those resources. We have AI helping us. We have, education that, sometimes is really expensive and hard to get. And now we have that available for myself and for our team members. And kind of, like you said, collapses that timeline of promotions all the way from staff really to the partner level. Is happening faster.
So we do have a few questions coming in on AI, but I'm only going to ask one of them because I will remind the audience that the last session of today at 4 o'clock Eastern time is all devoted to AI. So I don't want to go too down the rabbit hole, but I do want to ask you each a question, which is, how are you using AI in your practice? Nadia, can I start with you?
Yeah, Lucia. Nadia was in your
Sorry.
last session.
Oh my God.
But Nadia, I'm going to come at you after this because apparently we look alike, which is a compliment. So thank you. For me, AI is something that I've been able to adopt very quickly. So I left my accounting firm role as a partner about 5-6 months ago to join instead because I was so excited about AI and the ability to actually incorporate this into an industry that really hasn't changed a lot in the last few decades. And so for me, it's a daily occurrence. So we see it, obviously you see this flood of marketing information and you see content kind of being generated at a 10 times, I think, what it was before. And so I do feel like a lot of folks are using AI to generate content and to help. One of the things that I've seen the last couple of weeks actually is from a conversational standpoint, AI is just getting a lot better with actually teaching and having conversations and guiding the conversation. And I think for me, that's really where I think that the next wave of innovation is going to happen. Right now, and I think the last session mentioned this as well, the hardest thing for a provider is identifying the opportunities, right? What questions do I ask? And that's always kind of what people want to know. I think AI is going to get to a place where it already prompts you to ask you to tell you the questions that you should ask your clients, and I think that's going to be a really amazing thing. But today I use it on a daily basis to everything from medical to fact checking to I actually put my nieces who are 5 and 7 to bed with a bedtime story about them that I was able to generate in a couple minutes. So it is infused my daily life. A little controversial in my family because there is medical professionals in my family, but I actually also use an application called Pi, which Andrew and I have talked about before, but it's sort of a pocket therapist. So you can vent to it and sort of
good
talk
for
to it
tax
on a
season.
daily.
Good for
Good for tax season. Yeah, exactly.
I'll give 2 examples, and I think when you look at it, people have used it for things like marketing, and it's kind of like a fun gimmicky trick, but it's actually getting really good for tax use cases and tax documentation. So I'll give you 2 examples. One is on the R&D credit. Typically, firms don't feel comfortable, small firms, medium-sized firms don't feel comfortable providing the R&D tax credit unless they work with a specialist, and many people do that. That's what Lucia does, and that was what some of the previous sessions have done. But the hardest part has always been looking at a client and saying, does this really qualify for the R&D credit? And actually documenting that out. And so you can actually use AI in our Instead product to do that. and other products out there where you can basically go and say, okay, here's what the client's doing, here's what they're doing in their business, here's the products they're developing. Does this pass the 4-part IRS test? And you get a nice 2,500 or 5,000 word memo that you can use as tax documentation. That's kind of one area of tax that maybe you didn't feel comfortable doing, but hey, maybe now with AI I feel comfortable doing this. And then another good example is the Augusta rule, which is why we have these master's hats. It's basically where a taxpayer can rent out their house for less than 14 days, and they don't have to pay any taxes on that rental income. Now, they can rent it out on Airbnb, but a lot of business owners end up actually renting that out to their business and using it for business meetings and business purposes. And a lot of clients know about this, right? Your clients probably come in and ask about, like, I saw this TikTok video and I want to do the Augusta rule, right? I'm sure nobody's heard that, right? And so when you see that, though, it's like, oh, like, do I really have to do this? Like, it takes so long. But the reality of it is now you can use AI to do a variety of different things. Like with the Augusta rule, you need to find rental comparables. You need to actually document a business purpose. You need to create a rental agreement. And so now, if clients want to do that, it's something that in the past you maybe couldn't create an engagement out of. It would take you too long to do. You do it differently on every client, but now you can standardize it and you can use AI to do it in literally just a matter of minutes. And so the next time clients come in from their TikTok addiction and they want this one little thing that you don't normally do, it's something that now you can open those up and you can actually get the clients the savings and do it in a way that's economical for the firm and create new types of tax services engagements that we really just couldn't do before.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest impact we've had in our firm is being able to create that documentation and implement strategies for clients with the AI has had the biggest impact. But I'll add to that as an advisory firm, most of our clients don't understand the tax code. They don't really want to understand the tax code. So using AI to kind of break down some of those complex, maybe R&D, to a level that they can understand, like that AI has really helped us in being able to break that conversation down to a level that our clients can understand instead of a super complicated answer, because the AI understands the technical piece of it and can re-explain it and help our staff get up to speed quickly, understand it, and then be able to explain it to a client.
So are you prompting your AI to so a 15-year-old will understand, or so a 10-year-old, like what's your prompt that you put into AI?
So I think the average is like an 8th grade reading level that we may instruct that a little bit.
Okay, I love
Gail,
it.
do we need to take a break for
Yeah,
this?
we're going to take just a momentary break to hear a word from our sponsor, Instead by Corby. And when we come back, we'll have your second CPE code for this session. So don't go away.
Let's start off this demo by jumping into the Instead Pro dashboard. In order to access this, make sure you go over to instead.com and sign up for a free trial. When you log in, the first thing that you're going to notice is that your listing of clients will show up, as well as certain savings amounts that you've been able to find per client. And then you have a little tracker that says this is the estimated firm revenue that you could potentially charge based on these client accounts. And you'll be able to see the revenue tracker up here. Of course, you can go ahead and invite certain users to your firm, whether they're employees or another partner that you have at the firm. You can always invite them into your pro account. But in this case, we're going to jump into a specific client account, and you're going to come into our Instead account for John Goodwill. You'll see the tax savings that we've already been able to find for him, as well as the different entities that he has associated with his account. You can also continue to add additional entities based off of your client's needs. In this case, we're going to start off with John's account at the individual level. He is potentially eligible for the Augusta rule, so we're going to go ahead and jump into this particular strategy. So as I mentioned, you can start any strategy by determining whether or not there's an opportunity for some tax savings. And in this case, you'll see just as a basic estimate, 14 days, we're able to find a daily rental rate of $500, and you'll be able to see a potential rental amount about $7,000, and that will then trickle down to some tax-free income. And then from there, then we can start to figure out, okay, what are the specific rental days? How is this actually going to work? And you'll be able to see a little bit of a table here to say the different rental periods, as well as the purpose of the rental, or you could choose to go one by one to determine what goes into this particular rental. In this case, you can also determine, okay, you have rental rate comparables, as that plays into determining where you're getting these numbers from, and then making sure that they're getting some kind of payment. So you have the determining rental days. You also have the ability to build or upload rental agreements. You can add agreements or you can upload them. In this case, we have built our own rental agreement, and you'll be able to take a look and see that here. And of course, you can always edit the agreement. You can download it, and then you can make sure that you have in fact reviewed it. You can also do signatures and make sure that your rental agreement has been signed. And then in addition to that, you can jump into and see different business purposes for the personal residence rental. In this case, you have a business meeting memo that has been crafted, and you can edit and change that as you need to go about doing so. And then, of course, everything can get walked through specifically of how the different calculations were created for this particular strategy. As you continue to go through on the going back to the Instead dashboard, you'll be able to see for this particular entity, which is the C Corp, we have research and development tax credit, which can give you a significant amount of savings, as well as a couple of our new strategies, which is the depreciation and the home office strategy. So on the depreciation side, you can quickly jump in and start either adding your assets one by one, or you can do it as a step-by-step. In this case, we can showcase, that we have a particular asset here, answering a few questions about this asset, and then determining and deciding, how, if and when you want to actually maximize depreciation for this particular asset. In this case, we've decided to go ahead and do so, and you can see it both at the federal and at the state level. You can see all of your different assets broken down there, and then of course, one of the great parts here is you can also take a look and see, the breakdown of how you're able to come up and calculate these particular numbers for depreciation. Of course, you can continue on into home office, and this then gives you a really good understanding of, which offices do you have, which ones are in fact eligible, and walking you through the different questions and the different things you need to know to help determine whether or not this is an eligible office. And then, of course, as you continue through the home office strategies, you'll be able to add and edit and change out different expenses that come through and have them apply to your different offices. And then, as I mentioned previously, you can view the calculation and see how the different amounts that have been put in are being calculated here. One thing that I do want to mention is that you'll be able to see a total of your entire savings show up here, and then you can also continuously ask questions as you need to inside of our Instead AI chat. So you have that ability to ask any questions that you want to ask. You can also access our knowledge base at any point in time, and this will be able to walk you through at the Instead side and then the Instead Pro side certain questions that you might have about utilizing the software, as well as how to generate additional revenue and marketing to help you generate the clients that you need to save them money in taxes. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and jump back into the Instead Pro dashboard. And if you're wondering what is the pricing associated with this, you can head over to the firm settings and you can see billing and your plans. And in this case, the essentials is $15 per month, or if you want to go ahead on the annual side, it'll be $9 per month for Tax Pros. So you can go ahead and see the complete feature list of everything that is in fact included. So of course, if you want to go ahead and get started, head over to instead.com and sign up for a free trial.
Thank you for watching that. I hope you got a lot out of it, and we are back, and we want to show you our second CPE code for this session. So you want to be sure to write that down along with and save it with the first one you had if you need CPE credit. And I think we had a couple of questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think we're just going to take two more AI questions for now, since we have that other session 7 later today. The first one is, can you comment as a reliable resource to tax questions? I found that answers received are either wrong or limited due to chat's access to information. I mean, that's with anything, right?
ChatGPT,
Yeah,
though.
and I think ChatGPT is the most well-known platform, but I definitely don't think that it's the most accurate all the time. We use things like Perplexity, which gives you the actual links to the source where you can then do some checking as well. But I'm sure everybody by now has heard of those stories about hallucinations and things that AI can make up and stuff. I definitely still recommend doing all of those source fact checkings and going to the source. I find the IRS website for the most part is probably the best source of information when it comes to tax rules or laws or procedural issues. Mm-hmm. But I also think that as the bigger firms especially invest in more of like their internal AI, like we have our internal AI chat. Markham announced yesterday that they have their internal AI chat, I think that you're going to see that information get more up to date and better, healthier, faster. But I do also think that with the chat GPTs that came out and the ability to actually create your own, I do actually think that you can, fact check your own information now as well. So, just learning how to use those tools in a better, more efficient way could be something. And I know you've played around with it a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean, so with Instead, whenever we look at specific tax positions, we'll do all the research and feed it into the AI, so you get a much better response than you would if you go to something like ChatGPT. But when you want to really answer any tax question, and if you're looking at tax season, you're going to need to answer all sorts of tax questions. Some of them are going to be about things that have happened years ago. Some of them are about legislative changes this year. I do think the best product out there today is a product called Perplexity, and Lucia did mention that. The reason is because when you ask a question, you can ask it to just return .gov sources, or it'll return a ton of sources, and then every line of the response, it'll annotate and tell you, this is the source where I got this information, this is the source where I got this information. And I can go into these tools and I can ask any medical question that I want, but I'm not a doctor, so I'm like looking at it, I'm like, this could be absolutely right, or it's going to be wrong. And that's how your clients are going to feel about the tax question. So maybe they can use that tool as well, but I think the value that tax professionals really still provide is they can go in, look at those sources, check the actual accuracy of the response, and do any final editing, and that's where your value comes in. Like in the past, the research was a lot about actually researching. It was a lot about actually writing. Now it's really just down to review, right? Because we can have the research and we can have the writing done instantaneously, and so you can produce so much more than you could before, and you just have to do that review to make sure that it's accurate. And so I would say if you're looking for tax season to do that, I would recommend a tool like Perplexity, so you actually get that line-by-line annotation and you can look at the underlying source.
That's a good point too. I think like on the research side, right? Just remembering like your pyramid of information, like your tax code is the law. Your regulations explain your tax code. Then comes your case law, which explains your regulations and your tax code. And everything after that, is either commentary or it's not binding authority. So remembering that even when you do use these tools, you're not looking at binding authority until you actually get to the code. And I know like for you, I'm sure you make this point a lot with your staff, like at your firm, that you really should always have some kind of code or regulation evidence that what you're saying is actually accurate.
Right, and we would never just like Google something, before AI and just take the first article on Google as authority. It's a starting point. So like the AI, like with Perplexity, is fantastic that you've got the authority that you can go to, drill down to the tax code, the court cases, the regulations, and have all that, and that's the authority. But AI has like moved that forward past the Google search so far and exists so much more, but it's not perfect yet.
Yeah, and I think it's like Wikipedia, right? With Wikipedia, you can read an article and there can be some errors in there, but if you go down to the citations, there's a lot of good citations, and they pulled everything together for you and you can click through. Right. I think these are way more accurate than Wikipedia, and then the sources are also really good as well. So, it's something where I would recommend getting the team together, right? Getting the teams that are providing the services, that are going to be working with clients, and running tests. Like bring a client question in, run a test through, and see what do you like, what do you not like, and how do you start to integrate it into the workflow in a way that the team kind of buys into. And if you don't do that, they're probably already going to do it anyway, because it's going to make their job so much easier. But if you make it sort of a firm policy and we all agree on how we're going to do it, it can be much more transparent and streamlined, rolled out across the whole base.
And I know you guys are talking to David a little bit later about more of the security aspects, or maybe tomorrow, about the security aspects, but I also do think it's important to remember that we don't have security in these databases, right? So for the public, so ChatGPT, Perplexity, you probably want to err on the side of not including client information in your chat searches. And I think that's the error that a lot of folks are making right now. They're not thinking about the security, they just want real answers. But from a security standpoint, you probably want to use fake names, fake data, not upload any financials quite yet until we know what the actual security parameters are going to actually end up being. So definitely don't fall into that trap, and don't become that one lawyer who cited something fake, or put some fake information, or and then becomes the poster child for how not to use AI. So
yeah,
definitely,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, you foresaw what the other questions were. So I think we're going to wrap up the AI until session 7 today. But Gail, you had some other questions that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, let's start looking forward a little bit. What do we have to expect with President Biden's proposed budget?
I love talking about these things because obviously, this thing's going to be dead on arrival. The Republicans are never going to let this go through. But I do think that it's a starting point and it opens up negotiations. And I think that this is one of the things that providers really need to pay attention to, especially this next year. Things like the like-kind loopholes. And I'm sure you get this question a lot. Hey, can I do a like-kind exchange on my real estate? Those loopholes are really closing. Probably they're going to end up closing, but this is in that proposal. Changing the corporate tax rate from 21% to 25%. 28% is probably the most notable change, raising the rates of taxes for folks that make over $400,000. There's a lot of spend related to Medicare in that proposal, and I think that you're going to see a lot of tax increases across the board to make up for that spend. But again, I do think that this is just really like an opener to the negotiations. But I think they're going to get hot and heavy when they do get in there and start negotiating. But there's definitely going to be some changes. And again, with an election year, it's kind of, we all know that, who ends up taking power is kind of where the tax rules are going to go, and that's just the way that it goes. So I think that staying abreast of what these changes are and really understanding how they could impact your client base is important to do.
Yeah, and I would say probably, because to your point, it probably won't pass, or at least definitely won't pass in its current form, because they have to kind of battle it out. But really, one of the things I see the firms doing that works so well is you just take all the little triggering things in these proposals on either side, and you just kind of let clients know that they're being proposed, and it drives a lot of awareness, it drives a lot of interest for your services, because the exact things that are out right now I don't think probably will pass. And so they're not really going to get translated into law. They're going to go through and see. They might not even do anything before the election, but I do think there's a big opportunity on the marketing side. So, getting all clients on a newsletter, keeping them informed about these things, whether or not they go through, and having them feel like you're on top of it, I think is probably the biggest thing that's going to come out of these proposed tax changes.
Yeah, clients really want to see that confidence, so having that communicated out to the clients and to prospects is so huge.
I like what you said about triggering too, right? Because there's I believe, a line item in there that changes the death tax, and that's such a controversial area, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't even change it that much. I don't think it's more than $1 million change or whatever. But I've seen a couple articles already that firms put out that are just like triggering that, and you start looking at your client base and you start noticing that from an age perspective, you have a lot of clients that are aging. You put articles out there about the death tax, they're going to want to listen and they're going to pay attention. So, and to Andrew's point, and this is the last thing I'll say about AI, I promise. Using those AI tools to actually generate some of that content or outlines are great. And we found, and Andrew, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, but we did find that in our community, we get tons of questions about what tools can I use, how can I generate content, and so we're actually putting together a boot camp to actually show people what the tools are that we're using with AI, and maybe, especially for these smaller firms, help them actually navigate this world of what can I use AI in my firm, and what's going to be most beneficial right away.
Yeah, we have an AI tax team boot camp in January 10th to the 12th in Miami. So if anybody's interested in more about that, you can reach out to our team. And I would say that really it's just bringing together firms and technology companies to say, what is everybody doing? Because a lot of this stuff is so new. Like, we've got a perspective on how to use it in tax documentation for key tax positions, but there's so many other use cases across the firm, and seeing what firms are doing. I mean, these tools can, you can type in and ask a question, but you can also upload spreadsheets. Right, so they can read spreadsheets. You can also upload tax documents. You can upload, tax returns. They can see, right? So these documents can see, they can read, they can take all the information from a tax return and put it into a table. I mean, there's some really interesting things that people are just starting to play around with, and so we basically put that event together just to have everybody come in and share, like, what are we doing, and have everybody see what they can take from it.
And when we send you the resources information for this session, we will include information about that boot camp. So we'd like to pause just momentarily to display the third CPE code for this session.
The C gets to write it since I messed up her name.
Yeah, best part of my day.
All right, so you want to write down this code. That's the third one for this session for when you're ready to claim CPE credit. So what else is changing? I have some notes here about the rules for deducting meals.
Meals is something you really wouldn't expect to be that complicated or confusing, but it has gotten kind of confusing over the past couple of years. And that entertainment was completely eliminated with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And then we had the Consolidated Appropriations Act that made meals 100% deductible for a couple of years, but now that's going away. I feel like a lot of our clients just kind of adjusted to that and think meals are 100% deductible. Now they're 50% again, with just a few exclusions. So just kind of keeping the clients updated on that, maybe having some, like, using the marketing materials to push that out to clients and prospects so they understand that meals are going back, with few exceptions, to 50%. There's a few exceptions, like if you gross up meals into a employee's W-2, it's still 100% deductible. But travel meals are now 50%, client meals 50%. If you have a holiday party, that would be 100%. But normal meals for employees are going to be back to 50%. So that's a change in 23 and 24.
So no more 2-drink lunch client meals? That's going
Not
away?
at 100%,
Oh, bummer.
only 50%.
A lot of folks are going to hate
One
doing
drink.
that. Do you know of anything that's coming back from like restaurant revitalization? I know that was part of like the restaurant revitalization impact act or whatever they called it, but to get more folks to kind of go out. Do you know if they're replacing that with anything, or is there?
I haven't seen
anything in place?
anything. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll see, after the election year what changes, but nothing so far.
Yeah, interesting.
What about AMT? What's happening there?
So AMT is one of those sunsetting provisions that we were talking a little bit about before. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act changed both the exemption amount for AMT, bumped it up about $40,000 or $50,000 and change, but also it changed significantly the phase out for that exemption and took that up to over $1 million in income before that AMT phases out. That is one of the sunset provisions. It's going to go away in a couple of years. So AMT, in Tax Cuts and Job Act, before that act, there were about 5 million people that were affected by AMT, had their taxes increased, and we could see that as practitioners. We saw the AMT really creeping in, and it affected about 5 million taxpayers. With that change in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, that went down to about 200,000 taxpayers that it was affecting. When that sunsets and comes back, it's going to come back strong. They're expecting, the Tax Policy Institute expects it's going to affect 7.6 million taxpayers when AMT comes back, because both the exemption itself is going to drop back down to those lower levels, and the phase out is going to go down significantly. So we'll no longer have that $1 million phase out. We'll be back down to a phase out under $200,000, and it's going to affect a lot of our clients like it was prior to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act.
Brutal.
Okay, I've seen a lot of press, most of it negative, about the Corporate Transparency Act. What do we all need to know about that?
That's a big one, and it really is not necessarily an accounting thing or a CPA thing, but I think our clients are going to come to us about it because we're going to know about it. A lot of the clients that we work with are mid-market, maybe small clients. They don't necessarily have a registered agent or an attorney they work with regularly. So I think the clients are going to look to us about this. And it's confusing. It's already hitting TikTok and Instagram. So clients are coming to us. What about this? This is crazy. They're really worried about it. In a nutshell, it's a beneficial ownership reporting. So in the past few years, we've seen a lot of anonymous filing. The Wyoming LLCs got really popular because they're completely anonymous. You don't have to report who owns those. It's a little bit easier maybe to hide assets if you're trying to hide assets for many reasons. But now the federal government through FinCEN wants us to report the beneficial ownership, which is essentially anyone that owns 25% or more of the entity, or if you have control of that entity. So if you're the CEO, maybe a director of that organization, and you own that, then you have to be reported as well. What people are really getting confused and kind of alarmed about are those deadlines, because it starts January 1st, 2024. So a lot of people are thinking they have to have those filings done by January 1st, 2024, which is not at all the case. For existing entities, you'll have a year from January 1st, 2024 to report for those. The website isn't even up yet. You can't report yet. It should be live in January. But you'll have a year to be able to report for existing entities. After January 1st, then any new entity that's created has to be reported within 90 days. It was originally 30 days. People were freaking out about that. But it's going to be 90 days for any new entities created after January 1st, 2024. And again, through that FinCEN portal, that'll need to be reported. Whether we do that ourselves, whether we kind of push back for the client to do that or have someone else, I think it's an opportunity for us to help our clients. I've not seen anything yet where that's considered, practice of law. So I think that we can help our clients with that reporting if we want to charge for that. Add it to the tax return. It's fairly simple since we've got a full year to do that reporting, where we can add that to the tax prep, do that reporting for them, and our clients are safe. We just obviously want to have some procedures, processes in place where we can do a good job at that, make sure if we're going to do it for all of our clients, or make sure they know that's available to be able to help with that. But those deadlines, not something we need to panic about right now, but definitely get educated on.
I was going to ask you about that. What are you thinking about doing in terms of charging for it? Are you going to charge for it separately? Are you going to keep it in for like the larger tax clients? I mean, what if somebody is prep only? Like, what would you recommend people do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've decided so far that for most of our clients are advisory. So it's not an a la carte service. It's more of an all-encompassing service. So we're going to include that filing. If they want us to handle it, we're going to include that filing for our advisory clients. For our tax prep only, or for maybe just one-off service clients, then we'll have an additional fee that we'll charge them to do that filing.
So there are, you just mentioned about not practicing law, and a question of concern just surfaced from the audience and said, if CPAs give out potentially legal advice, they can be charged with practicing law without a license. So this person actually said CPAs should include a disclaimer in their engagement letters and refer clients to an attorney well-versed in the issue. James, what do you think? What's the best way to handle this?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, we haven't had that reviewed by our attorneys yet, but I think that's probably a good idea to review that with your attorney. Make sure that that's not providing legal services. A lot of states have cracked down recently on creating entities, and they say that is practicing law. We do other FinCEN reporting for our clients, so I'm not sure that this is all that different, but you should definitely, speak with your attorney and make sure that that's not providing legal services.
Okay. Other questions?
This was, can you go over, this might take a while, but can you go over what Section 174 encompasses?
Well, and actually, we do want to have, as part of our wrap-up, we want to have kind of a little commentary on 174 and what people need to take away from this session.
So maybe we should just put that on the back burner for an hour.
We can do it now.
Okay. Someone want to handle that then?
Yeah, it's a really broad area. So I previously alluded to the fact that R&D is a good starting point. So your R&D expenses will include things like wage expenses related to R&D, contractor expenses related to R&D in the U.S., and then supply expenses. On top of that, if you think about 174 sort of as a big bubble, R&D is a very small portion of that. You also see things like expenses incidental to the R&D, international costs related to the R&D, rental expenses. And so there are a couple lists that I've seen that are good, but it's also industry specific as well. So there was some guidance that came out from a software perspective, which basically said everything related incidentally to software development is considered R&D. So in that case, you have a lot of gray area to sort of look at that. So the first thing I would do is I would look at that broad list of what is considered 174. You can also use the toolkits that we are providing. And then the second thing that I would do is actually look at the industry-specific activities and then figure out what activities can be bifurcated and what activities are going to be R&E on paper and kind of what leeway you have there. But it is definitely a broader area than most people recognize, and R&D is a very small portion of that.
So Lucia, as a follow-up question, because this is another theme that's bubbling. We start to see this throughout the days, is like the industry specific. So are there certain industries that lend themselves to this more than others? That if the audience members have those industries as clients, they should be paying attention to those?
Yeah, 100%. So it's the industries that are related to engineering or hard sciences where you're really going to see an impact, and industries where they actually have a lot of R&E or R&D expenses offshore as well. So pharma was one of those industries. The pharmaceuticals industry was hit really hard by these regulations. Software development was hit pretty hard. Manufacturing, contract manufacturers, if there is a lot of R&D there that happens. Folks that work with a lot of materials and do a lot of that research, this is really hitting a lot of innovative industries. And so if you have a lot of clients that may be outside of the services areas and are doing technical work, have engineering staff, those are the ones that you really want to hone in on and pay attention to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we've got a question here for James. Do you have an outlook on the possibility that FinCEN reporting might be postponed again?
It's possible. We just saw literally a couple weeks ago a change in the deadlines come out. Since there's so much confusion, it's possible that may be delayed again, but I haven't heard anything about it yet.
Okay.
We live in this what-if world,
Yeah,
Gail.
we do. It's so true.
Do you want to move to takeaways, Gail?
We've kind of done the takeaways, which was 174 and FinCEN, and our last takeaway was best practices for experimenting with AI tools to drive efficiency and improve client experience. Do you want to handle that, Andrew?
Yeah, I just think that asking particularly maybe the younger people in the firm what they're doing is a good place to start. I can't tell you how many firms I've seen, especially when you get into some of the larger firms where they maybe banned some of these tools originally, but then really there's a lot of people still using them because it's just there's so much efficiency in being able to do their work. So I think kind of asking people, what are you doing? What have been your use cases? Maybe doing a couple of lunch and learns, a couple of get-togethers, and walking through actual client examples and making some agreements about what we're going to do. What tools are we going to use? Are we going to use ChatGPT? Are we going to use Perplexity? Are we going to use Instead? Are we going to use Canopy, Carbon? Like, what are the tools out there that have done a great job that are actually going to make a difference this tax season? And actually walk through one example, two examples, three examples, and then see, like, okay, does that really, is this something that we can use for a particular part of every return when we're doing tax preparation, or every client question that comes in, or maybe it's something that we're doing when we're actually delivering the return? You know, these things can do an incredible job if you scan a return and want to get an actual summary of what was different this year versus last year, or what are the key things that I can communicate to the client about what their tax return ended up yielding this year. So these are some really interesting use cases that a lot of people are already out there doing, and so I would just really encourage curiosity and testing over the next, sort of 60 days to get ready.
All right, well, we hope we whetted your appetite for fun things to look forward to during tax season. We want to thank our panel and Instead by Corvi for sponsoring this session. We're so glad you're with us today. We're going to take a break for an hour and stretch our legs and have some lunch, and then we'll be back. So we will see you at the top of the next hour.